My dear friends, there is an interesting comment given by the rabbis in the Talmud to a phrase in this Sabbath's portion of the Torah that I would like to interpret for you this Sabbath morning. We read, as Rabbi Kreitman already told you, we read this morning the Sedra B'Shalach, which told the story how the Israelites finally left the bondage of Egypt and they were on their way to freedom. And when they turned, they found that the Egyptians were pursuing them. Pharaoh changed his mind and he wanted to bring them back to slavery. Naturally, they ran, and they came to a dead end. They couldn't go any further. Before them were the waters of the Red Sea. And we can imagine their consternation, how they prayed to God, how they felt everything was lost. The Egyptians were coming closer and closer to them. And here, the road is closed, the waters are before them. And you remember the story, the miracle happened, the waters divided, and the Israelites marched on the dry land until they came to the other side, to the shore. Meanwhile, the Egyptians pursued them. By that time, the waters returned, and the Egyptians were drowned. And then, as we read today, Moses and the Israelites sang that beautiful song of triumph, the HaShirim, one of the most beautiful poetic songs in all the world's literature. And as you noticed, those of you who were present during the reading of the Torah, we honor that song. The entire congregation rises while it is read. And we read it not only on this Sabbath, again on Passover, the seventh day, but we read that song every morning in the year when we pray and recite our morning prayers. It has become part of the Jewish conscience. Now, the opening words of the introductory phrase is very interesting. Oz Shir, Moshe uvnei Yisrael. We usually translate it, and it's the correct translation. Then Moses and the children of Israel sang. We refer to the past. The rabbis were quick to notice that the verb sang, Shir, is really in the future. Those of you who know even the first elements of Hebrew know that in the past, the text should have said, Oz Shor Moshe. Then Moses sang. Shor is the past. Shir is the future, Lashon or seed. And the rabbis ask why. It looks like a mistake in the Bible. Oz Shor lo ne'emar. The Bible does not say Shor, elo Yoshir. In the future, literally, he will sing. Now the rabbis derive from this one of the teachings in our beliefs. Mikan litchias hamesim min haTorah. From this, the rabbis derived the doctrine that tchias hamesim, the resurrection of the dead, is referred to in the Bible. Now that's very interesting, but that is really not the theme of my sermon this morning. According to the rabbis, every teaching in law and in doctrine that the Jew has must find its source in the Bible. And if you will look in the Bible from beginning to the end, there is really no reference to Tchias HaMesim, to the resurrection of the dead. But the rabbis were anxious to spread that belief, and they had to find a reference in the Torah. So they found it in this, Oz Shir. They will sing. And the rabbi said that means after the resurrection of the dead. I want to take it in a more literal manner. I want to take it as it stands in the Bible. Oz Shir. And I think that here the Bible gives us a prophetic promise about the future. And what the Bible really wants to tell us is that the children of Israel sang this song of triumph not only that one time in our history, 3,500 years ago, but that they will have many such crises in their history. Again and again they will face a Red Sea of difficulties. But somehow the miracle again will recur. The waters will divide again. And the Israelites, Shir, they will sing again this song of triumph. Now, my friends, I haven't the time this morning to give you the many historic examples that I could give you where this promise was fulfilled. But let me refer just to one. Will the parents of that child please take him to the back? You can't expect a young child like that to really be at ease during a sermon. As I said, had I the time, I could give you many historic examples to prove how this promise was fulfilled. But let me just give you one historic example in our time, in the days of Hitler, Yamach Shemo v'zichro. In his day, we thought that the Jew was lost. We really faced a dead sea, a dead end. The Jews in all these lands that Hitler attacked were trapped, just as the Israelites were trapped before the waters of the Red Sea. They could not escape. Every gate was closed to them. There wasn't a land, including America, that offered refuge to these Israelites, to these Jews of today. It looked as if we are facing the end. But the miracle happened. The miracle happened. The waters did divide. And out of that tragedy, out of that Holocaust, there came the rebirth of Israel. And a new land has appeared upon the scene, the old land of Israel. And the Israelites today are really singing the Oz Shir, this ancient song of triumph. But my friends, there is a second phase, a second aspect to this promise. The Jews never stood idly by and relied on that God's promise that Oz Shir, somehow or other, the miracle will occur and he will be able to sing. No, not at all. He believed in that promise, but he worked to turn that promise into a reality. And the rabbis were quick to emphasize this truth. When the Israelites stood before the waters of the Red Sea and saw the Egyptians pursuing them, what did these Israelites do? They plunged into the waters, And when the waters were at Chot Mon, up to their noses, the rabbis say, then the miracle happened. That's how all the miracles happened. When the Jews were determined to force a miracle by their actions, by their work, by their sacrifices. And the rebirth of Israel didn't come about just suddenly out of the sky, a miracle from heaven. No. You know the story. You know how these Jews sacrificed. You remember the book and the picture Exodus, and it showed us how many Jews plunged into the sea, how many Jews gave their lives fighting for that freedom until they forced these modern waters of the Red Sea to divide and forced the miracle to appear. And that happened throughout our history. Now, my friends, this is true not only in the story of the resurrection physically of the Jew, the Tchias HaMesim of the Jewish people bodily, as we see in Israel, but also the Tchias HaMesim in our religious life. When you will study Jewish history, you will notice and you will find there were many times in our history when it looked as if our religion was disappearing. There were so many forces fighting our religion that it looked hopeless. And again, the miracle happened. To come to our own, not to our own, but to modern times, after the French Revolution, when the walls of the ghetto were shattered, and the Jew began to enjoy the sun of freedom, what happened to our religion? Many Jews in those years were so blinded by the new freedom that they were ready to surrender their religion. And hundreds upon hundreds of Jews in Germany, in France, and in England rushed to the baptismal font and adopted Christianity. And the thinking Jews were worried and concerned. Again, they believed that God's promise will be fulfilled, that our religion will not be destroyed. But they didn't rely on that faith alone. They worked and they sacrificed. And if you will read that period in Germany, you will see what efforts the Jews made, those who remained true to the Jewish faith. And they built seminaries, the Hildesheimer, the Breslau Seminary. The intellectuals organized a society for the study of Jüdische Wissenschaft, the science of Judaism, and even the early founders of Reform Judaism in Germany. Even that movement was an attempt to save the Jewish religion. They may have made mistakes later on, but their original purpose was to save the religious life. And they worked and sacrificed and did save the religious life in those lands, so that for a long period, Oz Shir was fulfilled. The Jews were able to sing this song of triumph. Now, my friends, I see this historic development in our own Jewish life in America. I see it and I recall it particularly today because, as many of you know, this Sabbath has a particular interest to me. It happens to be my bar mitzvah Shabbos. That is why they honored me and gave me maftir today. Now, I recall very vividly not only my own bar mitzvah and how the event occurred and what took place, but I can think back clearly and see Jewish life as it was in America at that time. It's only a matter of 63 years, a very little span of years in the people's history. And yet, what a change we notice in the Jewish life today and in the Jewish life of America at the beginning of the 20th century. That was the time of the large Jewish immigration into America. Every week, thousands, tens of thousands of Jews came to America from the East European lands. They found a new life here, not only freedom, but an opportunity to make headway in economic life, something that was denied them in the old lands. And they rushed after these opportunities. And the new life blinded many of our people, actually blinded them. They became indifferent to their religion. They neglected the religious education of their children. Their one aim was to take advantage of what America offered them. We can't altogether blame them because it was the first time in centuries that they enjoyed that opportunity. And there were many Jews who became blinded by this new freedom, and they thought that they actually have to cast away their religious burden. They said, we have outlived Judaism. It may have been all right in Russia and Romania. It has no place here. Here we are brothers with all the world. And many of the Jews, how I remember them in my home city in Philadelphia, the old Jews, they sat and wept, actually wept, as to what is taking place in America. They saw a generation growing up void of any Jewish teaching. And you know, the older people here know the refrain, the popular refrain that you heard again and again from the mouths of these old people. A clog to Columbus. A clog to Columbus, a curse to Columbus. They really didn't mean to curse him. But that was the way they expressed their disappointment to see what freedom brought about in the Jewish life. But fortunately, in every community, there were a few Jews who remembered that promise of the Bible, Oz Yashir. And they began to think how to turn that promise into a reality. And you found men and women working, struggling, making tremendous sacrifices to plunge into the waters of this modern Red Sea and to force the waters to divide. And you saw the beginnings of yeshivos, of a seminary, just the beginning at that time. But there were movements that were progressing daily and making impact on Jewish life. When I recall that it was only about 18 or 19 years after my bar mitzvah year when this very center was built, at a time when Jewish religious life was still in the wilderness. But like here in so many communities, there were Jews who remembered that promise as your Shir, that the Jew will sing and can sing a song of triumph, but only if Jews will work to transform that promise into a reality. And we have made tremendous sacrifices. We have saved Jewish life. But today there is another crisis. And the crisis is becoming more serious every day. And it's becoming more difficult to battle that crisis than it was before. But because before it was only the economic life that held back the Jew. Today, thank God, the Jew has made his mark in economic life. He has mastered the struggle. Today we have an intellectual challenge, a much more serious challenge in Jewish life. And there are many thinkers, serious thinkers, who are becoming very pessimistic about the Jewish spiritual life in America for the future. Now, in my day, when I was a youngster, there were very few Jewish boys and hardly any Jewish girls who went to college. I remember I belonged to a large group of boys and girls of Zionist society. Only a handful of us went to college. The other boys were glad if they finished high school, and then they had to go to work to help their parents, or they went into the business of their parents. Only a handful went to college. Today, there is hardly a Jewish boy or girl who doesn't go to college. And this going to college has already changed the aspect of Jewish life. In college, a new world faces that young man. And unless he comes prepared intellectually, Jewishly, all his popular thoughts that he had about Judaism go to the wind. And he easily spurns his Jewish identity. There has recently appeared, I've referred to it, Rabbi Kreitman referred to it many times, there appeared a sociological study about the rise in intermarriage among Jews in America. And let me take just one example of that study. He studies the Jews in the city of Washington. It's a very good example because in Washington you have Jews coming from every part of the country. And he cites the difference between intermarriage of the first generation Jews, the intermarriage rate of the second generation Jews, and the intermarriage rate of the third generation Jews, the third generation born in America. In the first generation, there's only 1.5%. The second generation, it rose to 10%. The third generation to 17.9%. Can you imagine such a tremendous rise in intermarriage? And the interesting thing that he brings out, that the rate among college students and college graduates, boys and girls or young men and young women who either are going to college or who had a college education, the rate rose more than double that overall of 17.9%. You can see what that college education is doing to our young men and women. It's a blessing, a great blessing. Our grandfathers didn't have the opportunity to go to college in the old world. It's a great blessing, but at the same time, it has become a curse because so many of these boys and girls enter college life unprepared Jewishly, without a Jewish education, without the right kind of Jewish education, without any influence of a Jewish home, never seeing or never discussing Jewish life with Jewish intelligent parents. And you can see when they come under the influence of the science and philosophy and the literature of modern times, how everything within them becomes shattered. Here again there is a challenge, and it looks hopeless. But we have to recall the promise, HaShirim, the Jew can sing, and he will sing. If there will be enough Jews in America, like there were among the first generation Jews, who will be willing to work and to struggle and to sacrifice, to break these waters asunder, to force a clear path of achievement so that Jewish religious life can be assured in America. It is a new challenge for you and for me. It's a very serious challenge, but it's a challenge to which we will have to give much thought, much planning, and above all, much sacrifice. And if we will be that type of Jew, as were the founders of this Brooklyn Jewish Center, who were determined to force a breakthrough in the waters of the modern Red Sea, if we will have that spirit, I still have the faith that despite this new crisis in which we are facing, the waters will again divide, and the miracle will again appear. And HaShirim, our people will again be able to sing and will sing a new song of triumph, and will call out as our ancestors called out in ancient times, Ze Eli v'anvehu, Elohei avi v'aromemenu. This is my God, and I will glorify him, the God of my fathers, and I will exalt him. Amen.